Hey guys, so I'm making this video as a follow-up to the lab that we had this afternoon. I want to try this and see how well it works. Basically, I just want to highlight some key points from lab, just in case you didn't completely understand it, you're a little fuzzy, or you just want to reference to it later. Comment and let me know if you like this, or if you want me to cover something else in more detail in another video, comment and let me know as well. But basically, I'd really appreciate some feedback from you guys so that I know what's working for you and what isn't. All right, some bullet points of what I want to cover in this lab. I want to go over, again, really quickly, the naming convention of the URLs that all of the rest of our assignments are going to be on. I also want to show you some things in Terminal, just a really clear way of like knowing what you should be doing when you come into lab. And I also want to show you how to zip a file in Terminal. And I want to go over the factorial functions that we wrote this morning in lecture. Guna put up the ones that were not working and asked you to debug them, but we didn't spend a whole lot of time on the one that was working. So I thought that we would go through that and get a deeper understanding of why it actually is working. So I thought that would be useful. But anyway, we're going to get started. Hopefully this video doesn't become too long. But first things first, so this is the naming convention for the URLs that will contain your assignments from now on. Basically, if you copy this down, all you need to modify is this bit right here. So if you're looking for any of our labs, the ones that we start in lab, and you work on and turn in electronically, you would go to something like this, PA, whatever, and then the number of the specific one that you're looking for. So if I change to PA1 now, this is the assignment for what we did in our first lab. And all of these links are working, by the way, so this is why I like this. Alright, so if you wanted to go to the instructions for a written assignment, you would get rid of PA and say written, and then put the number that you want to go to. So if we do this, we can go to written 1. And so that's that. So I would recommend you, even if the links on the course website are not taking you here, abide by this naming convention, because these are the most updated versions, because this is my website and I am updating these constantly as I change them. So just in case there are any like syntax errors or anything that's going wrong, just formatting issues, this will be the most updated one. So by the way, don't panic if like the future ones aren't up yet. I haven't taken them online. So, but they will be up by the time that they're supposed to be assigned. Alright, so the next thing that I want to cover is terminal. So if I'm going to open my terminal here. Alright, so obviously I'm not on a Linux machine, I'm on my own local machine, but I've kind of mimicked the directory path that you will have to follow when you come into lab on mine. So mine is just a bunch of empty directories, but it looks the same. So come here, my top directory, ls. I have a private folder, just like you do, in your Linux machines. So if I cd to that, I will see that I have also a 15110 folder that you guys have on your Linux machines as well. So if I cd to 15110, I also have 2 labs. So up until this point, this is what your 15110 folder should look like. If you have a few extras, that's fine, not a big deal. But if I also wanted to make a new directory, we went over this command. You want to make this all of your lab directories in 15110. So while you're in this directory, you want to put in the command mkdir. This stands for make directory, and say we want to make the directory for lab3. So all you have to do is type in the name, press enter, and if you ls again, you'll see that lab3 is sitting right here. Alright, so I want to go into how to zip a file. So say that like today we were in lab 2. So if I cd to lab 2, alright, actually let's do gedit first. Okay, so this command is not actually going to work on my computer because it's a Mac. I'm sorry Mac users, this isn't a built-in function for Macs. So you will have to upload manually from like using fetch. But it's not too big of a deal. I survived 110 without ever using this, so it's not a big deal. Alright, so if you were on a Linux machine or you are running Windows, you would enter gedit while you are in the lab that you're working in. So right now I'm in lab 2, you enter gedit ampersand. Alright, and you press enter. And this isn't going to work for me, but that's fine. However, wherever you're doing this, if you enter this command, it will kind of get rid of your command prompt right here. and that's a little confusing, but all you have to do is get rid of that is just press enter again, and it'll take care of itself. So if I was in a Linux machine or a Mac, or sorry, Windows right now, this command would open gedit for me. So I'm just going to do it manually because that's not going to work. Alright, so I opened a new gedit. So some things about gedit, I want to show you how to adjust your preferences again, just so that you guys can have a reference. Okay, so again, this is a little different because this is a Mac application. I believe that on the Linux machines, this menu right here will be somewhere like sitting somewhere below this bar, but let's just pretend that it is. Alright, so if you are in a Linux machine, you would go to Edit, and you will find Preference somewhere here, but that's not the case because I'm on a Mac. So instead, mine is under gedit, and I would click Preferences, and an important thing that we talked about today in Lab was adjusting line or displaying line numbers. Mine are already set to display, but if yours isn't, just check this little box right here, and you don't need to save it, just close it. It'll be all good. Alright, come on now. Alright, I didn't make any changes, so I guess that's why it didn't let me close. Alright, so also tab width, if you want to adjust this, the auto is like 8 spaces, which is really ridiculous. You don't need that much. So you can also adjust your tab width to 2. You can also do that here in preferences as well. If you go to editor, you can adjust your tab. Alright, so that's enough about gedit. I'm just going to get rid of that. I don't use gedit for a number of purposes just because I don't really like it. I use something called MacVim instead. So Mac users, I think this is a great text editor. You might want to download it if you're interested, but I can definitely show you how to use this as well. Alright, so I want to show you how to zip a file. So the first thing I would have to do is create a file, and just for the heck of it, let's type in the factorial function that was working today. So I'll go over this in more detail later when we actually write it, but let's just say this, and for all intents and purposes, let's just make it a comment for now. I'll go over comments. We will go over comments later, but basically all you have to know is that I'm saving this as like a .rb file, and I don't want it to get angry at me. So here in gedit, like pretend that I'm in gedit now. Just make sure you go to your private folder. You want to go to your 15110, and you want to go to, if you're saving this Lab2, you want to go to Lab2. So let's just save this as, because it's going to be factorial later. Factorial, say demo.rb. Alright, hit save, all good. Alright, so here, if I go here now, because I am in Lab2, it should come up that I have saved it here. Alright, so how to zip a file in terminal. This is a command. If you are in the directory that contains the file that you are trying to zip, you would enter zip and then -r, and then, okay, this first kind of, I guess, block of words is going to be the name that you give the zipped folder. So it is going to be something like, if I want to save this factorial demo and then .zip, I would name it like this. And the second, you want to put a space, and then the second part will be the original file that you're trying to zip. So in this case, it's factorial demo.rb. So if I put that here, it should be adding factorial this. Alright, so if I ls, both of them should be sitting there, and then you can just email this zipped file to us. Alright, so not so hard, just remember these commands. Okay, so talking about the factorial functions that we wrote today in class. Brendan wrote a lovely working factorial function that is exactly the same thing that I came up with when Guna asked us to write that. So let's go over why it works. Alright, so I am going to actually write a working function now. We're going to define, and then let's call it factorial, and then it takes an input n, which is going to be the factorial that you want. Alright, so he used a while loop. So let's talk about the while loop first. Alright, so his while loop looks something like while n is greater than 0, and I guess you can use parenthesis too for these conditionals, Personally, I don't. If you feel that it's more organized for you, go ahead. If not, this is usually how I write it. Okay, so while n is greater than 0, do this. Right, so I can see that the logic behind this is basically that he is going to decrement from n. So knowing that, we can probably put somewhere in the while loop n equals n minus 1. I personally am really OCD, so I like spaces between all of those, but you don't have to. These aren't really that important when you're writing in a text editor. Alright, so the logic behind this loop is that each time this loop is going to be executed, n is going to be decremented by 1. So he's going to do this every single time from n until he reaches 0, in which case if n is 0, this condition is no longer going to hold true and it's going to exit the loop. So basically, if you're using a graphic text editor, it's going to highlight for you whenever you see something that is in a different color, you need an end statement. And MacMem is nice because it will tell you there's a different color for the end of the method and then the end of each loop or conditional. So here I'm ending my while statement, and like Andrew mentioned today, it's just good practice to line these up. They're kind of like paragraphs or bullet points or whatever you want to call them. Alright, so this is my while loop, and whatever inside it I'm going to do while this condition still holds true. Alright, so what he is actually going to do then is that he wants some variable that is basically what he's going to return as a factorial to be multiplied by n each time, and n is going to decrement each time, which means that he's going to multiply this thing every time. So say we enter n is 6, so he's going to multiply this thing by, did I say n is 6? Alright, I said n is, let's say n is 3. Alright, so if n is 3, he's going to multiply this thing by 3 and then decrement by 1. And then he is going to iterate again and multiply by 2, so 3 times 2. And then he's going to iterate again, and now it's 3 times 2 times 1. So that's basically how the factorial is going to be laid out. So let's, for the sake of convention, name this fact for factorial. And I usually don't like to name my variables in a method the same name as the method. It's not going to cause you any major issues. The only thing is that it will get confusing when we start doing recursion, which are basically methods that call themselves. So I would just stick with calling this something besides the method name. Alright, so we have a variable fact, and the way we would write this is fact and then times n. So, and then n changes each time. Alright, so the problem though is that if I just do this, fact equals fact times n, anything on the other side of, on the right side of an equal sign, Ruby automatically assumes is pre-assigned, I guess, is a variable that has already been assigned a value or some type of data. But if this has not been assigned yet, it's going to complain. So we have to initialize our variable, which basically means define it in some way. So let's define it in a way that's not going to affect this. If we're multiplying this as a product, we can assign fact as 1 because anything multiplied by 1 is itself, so that's not really going to affect anything. So we can do fact 1. Alright, so now Ruby's not going to complain when we want to say fact times n. Alright, so that's pretty much it for the while loop. I hope that makes sense for everyone. If not, come see us in office hours. You probably want to know how to do this. Alright, so I exited my loop and I want to return my factorial. So that is a variable and I want to end it. So it's a pretty simple process. It's just thinking through it and understanding how the computer is interpreting your code. Alright, so we want to save this, and yeah, this is the one that I saved here. So how you would access this in Ruby. Right now you can see that my command line says that I'm in terminal. Whenever there's a $sign at the end, it means that I'm in terminal. So what you want to do is IRB. Alright, so now that I'm in Ruby, I have these little carets. It depends. If you're on the Linux machines, they'll give you some text and then a few carets, but it doesn't really matter. You basically know if you have a caret that you're in the Ruby shell or some other kind of language shell. Alright, so the first thing I want to do is, I skipped a step here. I saved it before. Like many text editors, MacVim is going to put a little asterisk or plus sign there if it's not saved. So just make sure you hit save every time you change something here. Alright, so I'm going to load factorial demo.rb. Alright, so assuming that I haven't done anything incorrect, Ruby's not complaining, it returns true. Alright, so let's see if this works. And then let's put 3 to return 6. Alright, so if you want to trace that again, I recommend just going through this and rewriting it for yourself and understanding what each line is doing. Alright, so some other things I want to go over. Guna talked about writing functions within functions this morning. That is a really, really bad practice, and the reason for that is because you can essentially make your program more flexible by writing multiple functions in one file and then calling those functions to essentially complete what you want to do in a more flexible way. So let's say that I wanted to basically print a string that says factorials are really great. So I can do this in this function and just basically say print factorials are really great. Alright, and explain the new line character a little bit. Basically what happens is it's literally just a new line character. When the computer sees this, it prints a new line. So I want to do that just because it's prettier. Alright, so if I were to do this and I saved it, and I came here and I loaded this again, each time you edit, you should save, load this again, and then I want to call, let's call factorial 3 again. So now it's printing factorials are really great. But this is something that's kind of just a prisoner in this function. If I wanted to do this somewhere else in another function, I wouldn't be able to access this. So a good way to solve that issue, I'm going to copy and cut here. Alright, so if I were to define another method in here, so let's say def, and let's call this printing. And this function does not have to take parameters, so I can either put empty parameters there, or I can just kind of not give it anything. But either way, Ruby will accept it. So if I paste what I just put here, and then I want to just end this. If I called this here by literally just putting in printing, this is going to call this function and essentially do whatever, this is going to do whatever it does in this at this time in the method. Alright, so I'm going to save that again, I'm going to load it, and this is going to do exactly the same thing, except that I can use this function in another function. So if I were to say that I want to write another method, let's call it def lesson, and say we want to say, like, you know, what did you learn today in 15.1.10? So we can say that too. We just basically print a string called what did we learn in 15.1.10. Let's put today. Alright. So I want to do the same thing, new line. Alright. And if I wanted to call this and say, basically, oh, we learned how to, factorials are really great, we learned that in 15.1.10, I would call printing here as well and end it. And what I can do now is if I load this thing and I run factorial 3, factorials are really great, this will print out here, but if I also run lesson, it's going to print out here as well. So that was the point that Guna was making, that if you write a separate function and then call it, it will basically save you a bunch of headaches for writing this thing over and over again. But they do have to all be in the same file, if that makes any sense. Alright, so I hope that that clarified a few things for you, and you understand a little bit better why we do the things that we do. It will probably be useful in computer science later on. If you have any questions or comments, just please let me know on the comments. Tell me if you liked it, tell me what you want me to cover more, or just tell me if you hated it, that's fine. I really want to know what you guys think, but hope you understand it and hope you enjoyed it. But I will see you on Friday in lecture. Right? Bye.